Let us start the book, Radical Candor. Let me start with a confession from the author herself, because it is the story that gave birth to this entire book. Early in her career, Kim Scott hired a guy we will call Bob. Bob was charming, likable, and everyone on the team adored him. There was just one problem. His work was not good enough. It was not even close. But every time Kim sat down to give Bob feedback, she lost her nerve. He was so nice, so well liked, and she did not want to upset him or damage their friendly relationship. So instead of telling him the truth, she would soften it, sugarcoat it, or just let it slide. "Do not worry about it," she would say. "You are doing great." For almost a year, she told herself she was being kind. Then the day came when Bob's poor performance had put the whole team at risk, and Kim had no choice but to fire him. And when she did, Bob looked at her, stunned, and said something she would never forget. He said, "Why did not anyone tell me? Why did not you tell me?" And then he asked the question that haunts every manager who has ever pulled their punches. "Why did not you tell me when I still had a chance to fix it?" Kim realized in that moment that her so-called kindness had been the cruelest thing she could have done. By trying to spare Bob's feelings in the short term, she had failed him completely. She would robbed him of the chance to improve, let him keep failing, and ultimately cost him his job. Her niceness was not nice at all. It is worth understanding exactly how Kim talked herself into this mistake, because her rationalizations are ones we all use. Bob was a genuinely likable, kind, funny colleague with a stellar resume. But his work was, in her words, a word salad, incoherent, nowhere near good enough. And she could even see the shame in his eyes when he handed it over. He knew it was not good. So why did she stay silent for so long? First, she liked him and did not want to come down hard on someone who looked like he might cry. She even worried that if he cried, the whole team would think she was a bully. Second, she told herself that since his references were so good, he would surely bounce back to that level eventually. And third, it was simply faster, in the moment, to just fix the document herself than to teach him how to do it right. Each rationalization felt reasonable. Together, they added up to a catastrophe. And notice that not one of those reasons was actually about helping Bob. They were about Kim's own comfort. That painful lesson is the seed of Radical Candor by Kim Scott, one of the most practical and influential books on management and leadership written in the last decade. Kim Scott has had a remarkable career. She led teams at Google, she worked at Apple, where she taught a class at Apple University, and she went on to coach the CEOs of some of Silicon Valley's most important companies. And across all of that experience, she discovered that the single hardest thing for almost every boss, and the thing that separates the great ones from the rest, is learning how to be honest with people while still showing them you care. Here is the big idea at the heart of the book, and it is deceptively simple. Being a good boss, or honestly, being a good human being to the people around you, comes down to two things you have to do at the same time. You have to genuinely care about people as human beings. And you have to be willing to challenge them directly, to tell them the truth, even when it is hard. Most of us are good at one of these. We are either warm but dishonest, or honest, but cold. The magic, what Kim Scott calls radical candor, happens when you do both at once. You care deeply, and precisely because you care, you tell the truth. And let me clear up the biggest misconception right away, because the title trips people up. Radical candor is not about being brutally honest. It is not a license to be a jerk, to dump harsh criticism on people, or to say whatever you want and call it honesty. In fact, it is the opposite. As you will see, the whole framework is built to keep you from becoming a jerk, while also keeping you from becoming a pushover. Over the next hour or so, I am going to walk you through Kim Scott's entire framework, the famous quadrant that will change how you think about every conversation you have, the counterintuitive place you must start, and the practical tools for building relationships, getting things done. So get comfortable, and let us begin. Before we dive into the key points, here are the top 5 things you will take away from this video. First, you will learn the core framework of radical candor itself, the 2 simple dimensions of caring personally and challenging directly, and why bringing them together is the key to being a great boss and a better person. Second, you will discover the 3 ways guidance goes wrong, the dangerous trap of ruinous empathy, the harm of obnoxious aggression, and the worst quadrant of all, manipulative insincerity, so you can recognize and avoid each one. Third, you will learn the single most important and counterintuitive place to start, which is not by criticizing your team, but by humbly asking them to criticize you first. Fourth, you will understand how to truly motivate people by getting to know what each person actually wants, learning to value both your steady rock stars and your ambitious superstars, and helping everyone move toward their own dreams. And fifth, you will learn a practical, collaborative process for making great decisions and getting things done as a team without becoming a controlling micromanager or a hands-off absentee. That is the road ahead. Let us get into the first key point. Point 1. The 2 dimensions being a great boss, care personally and challenge directly. The first key point is the foundation that the entire book rests on. Kim Scott argues that good guidance, which is really the core of good leadership, comes down to distinct dimensions. And when you understand these 2 dimensions, you suddenly have a map for every difficult conversation you will ever have. The first dimension is what she calls care personally. This means caring about the people you work with as actual human beings, not just as workers who perform a function. It means rejecting the old, sterile idea that you should keep it strictly professional, that you should leave your real self at the door and treat the workplace as some emotionless zone. Kim Scott's mentor at Google, Fred Kaufman, had a mantra that captures this perfectly. Bring your whole self to work. Caring personally means you give a damn about people's lives, their dreams, their struggles, and who they really are. It means being willing to show a little of your own humanity too, to admit when you are having a bad day, to be vulnerable, to create a space where people do not have to pretend to be robots. Because here's the truth. We spend the majority of our waking lives at work. If we have to suppress our real selves the entire time, we become alienated and miserable. Caring personally is the antidote to that. The second dimension is what she calls challenge directly. This means being willing to tell people when their work is not good enough, or when it is. It means giving the hard feedback, making the tough calls, and holding a high bar. Challenging people directly will sometimes upset them, at least at first, and that is exactly why so many bosses avoid it. It feels like challenging someone is the opposite of caring about them. But Kim Scott flips that completely. She argues that challenging people directly is often the very best way to show them that you care. Think about it. If you let someone keep failing without telling them, like Kim did with Bob, you are not caring for them. You are abandoning them. When you take the time and the emotional risk to tell someone a hard truth, you are saying, in effect, I believe in you, I think you can do better, and I respect you enough to be honest with you. Challenging directly is care in action. Now here is where it all comes together. When you do both of these things at the same time, when you care personally and challenge directly, that is radical candor. It is the sweet spot. It is telling someone the truth they need to hear in a way that makes it absolutely clear you are on their side. There is a wonderful little story in the book that captures the spirit of it. Kim once had her dog, and a stranger on the street saw her letting the dog do something dangerous and said to her, bluntly, I can see you really love that dog. Then he told her, firmly, that she was going to get the dog killed if she did not train it better. Then he offered to help. He said, "It is not mean, it is clear." And that phrase became one of Kim's management mantras. It is not mean, it is clear. Telling people the clear truth is not cruelty. Vague mush that leaves people confused about where they stand, that is the real cruelty. The crucial thing to understand is that these two dimensions are independent. You can be high or low on each one, separately. And that simple insight creates a map, a 2x2 grid, with 4 quadrants. Radical candor is the good one, where you are high on both caring and challenging. But there are 3 other quadrants, 3 ways things go wrong, and understanding them is so important that we are going to spend the next several points walking through each one. Before we do, it is worth pausing on why Kim chose those 2 specific words, radical and candor, because they each carry meaning. Why radical? Because so many of us have been conditioned our entire lives to avoid saying what we really think. We swallow our honest opinions to dodge conflict or embarrassment. That is understandable, even adaptive, in ordinary social life, but in a boss it is disastrous. So it takes something that feels almost radical to push past that deep conditioning and actually be clear. And why candor rather than just honesty? This is a subtle but beautiful distinction. Kim deliberately avoided the word honesty because there is an arrogance buried in it, a sense that you possess the truth and are bestowing it. Candor, by contrast, carries humility. When you offer candor, you are simply sharing your own perspective on what is going on, fully expecting the other person to share theirs, and genuinely open to the possibility that you are the one who has got it wrong. Candor is a two-way street. It is not "here's the truth." It is "here is how it looks to me. What am I missing?" And underneath all of this is a foundational idea that reframes the whole job of being a boss. Relationships, not power, are what drive you forward. Kim is emphatic that you cannot fulfill your responsibilities, guiding people, building a team, getting results, through authority and control alone. Sure, raw power works in the baboon troop or a totalitarian regime, but it is not what builds a great team. What actually drives everything is the quality of the trusting human relationships you build with each person who reports to you. There is a virtuous cycle. Strong relationships let you give better guidance, which strengthens the relationships further. And there is a vicious cycle too. When you fail to guide people honestly, you erode trust, which makes everything harder. So radical candor is not just a feedback technique. It is the engine of the relationships that make you effective in the first place. The goal is not to be perfect. It is to be aware of where you are and to keep steering back toward radical candor. Because the truth is, all of us, no matter how good our intentions, slip into these failure modes constantly. Point 2. Ruinous empathy, the trap of being too nice. The second key point is, in my opinion, the most important one in the entire book for most people, because it is the trap that the kindest, most well-meaning people fall into. Kim Scott calls it ruinous empathy. And it is exactly what happened with Bob. Ruinous empathy is what you get when you care personally, but you fail to challenge directly. In other words, you are warm, you are kind, you are nice, but you are not honest. You see that someone's work has a problem, or that they have something stuck in their teeth, or that they are heading down the wrong path, and you say nothing because you do not want to hurt their feelings or make things awkward. You prioritize their short-term comfort and your own comfort over their long-term success. It feels compassionate. It feels like the kind thing to do. But Kim Scott argues it is actually ruinous, because the result is that the person never gets the feedback they need to improve. This is the quadrant that most nice people live in, and it is responsible for an enormous amount of workplace dysfunction. Think about the manager who only ever says good job and you are doing great, even when there are real problems. Their direct reports never know where they truly stand. They sense that something might be wrong, but no one will tell them what, so they cannot fix it. They stall out. They get passed over. And eventually, sometimes, they get fired, blindsided, having had no idea anything was wrong. That is ruinous empathy. The praise is just as damaged as the criticism, by the way. Praise given in ruinous empathy is vague and hollow, great work, really great, because its real goal is just to make the person feel good in the moment, not to genuinely tell them what they did well so they can do more of it. Kim Scott is brutally honest that this was her own besetting sin. The Bob story is the definitive example. For nearly a year, she chose to be nice, rather than clear, and the cost was Bob's job, and, in a real sense, her own integrity as his boss. She thought she was being a good, caring person. In reality, she was failing the most basic duty she had to him. And here's the part that really stings. Ruinous empathy is not even truly about the other person. Very often, it is about us. We stay quiet because we do not want the discomfort of a hard conversation. We dress it up as kindness, but it is frequently a kind of self-protection. We are managing our own anxiety at the expense of someone else's growth. There is a related insight here about why ruinous empathy is so seductive and so common. Many bosses make the mistake of thinking they should hang out in the ruinous empathy zone for a while to build a relationship first, and then, once they have earned trust, they will start being honest. But Kim Scott says this almost never works. The longer you go being only nice, the harder it becomes to suddenly start being honest, and the more your eventual honesty feels like a betrayal. The relationship you built was a false one, built on you withholding the truth. Far better to be radically candid from the start. In fact, she points out that offering someone genuine, caring, honest feedback is itself one of the fastest ways to build a real relationship and earn real trust. You do not need monks of pleasantries first. Clear, caring truth telling is how trust gets built, not the thing you do after. It is also worth noting that what counts as radically candid versus ruinously empathetic is not fixed. It shifts from person to person and culture to culture. Kim is careful to point out that the very same words that feel perfectly clear and caring to one person might feel obnoxiously harsh to another, or to touchy-feely to a third. It changes from one company to another, and even more dramatically from one country to another. This is why Radical Candor is never a script you can memorize. It requires you to actually know the individual human being in front of you, and to constantly read how your guidance is landing for that specific person, adjusting as you go. Caring personally is precisely what makes that calibration possible. So the lesson of this point is a hard one to swallow for kind-hearted people. Your instinct to spare someone's feelings may be the very thing that hurts them most. Silence is not kindness. Withholding the truth someone needs to grow is not compassion. It is ruinous. The most caring thing you can often do is gather your courage and clearly, kindly, tell them what they need to hear. Point 3. Obnoxious aggression, challenging without caring. The third key point covers the quadrant that gets all the attention and gives the book its slightly scary-sounding title, even though it is not actually what Radical Candor is about at all. Kim Scott calls it obnoxious aggression. This is what happens when you challenge directly but you fail to care personally. Obnoxious aggression is criticism that is honest but delivered without any warmth, respect, or evidence that you actually care about the person. It is when you tell someone their work is bad, but you do not take even 2 seconds to show you give a damn about them as a human being. This is the domain of the classic workplace jerk, the boss who belittles people in meetings, who criticizes to make themselves feel powerful, who treats honesty as a license for cruelty. Kim Scott sometimes also calls it front-stabbing. It is better than backstabbing, because at least it is to your face, but it is still bad. Here is a nuance that makes the book so honest, though. Kim Scott actually argues that if you cannot manage to be radically candid, then obnoxious aggression is, surprisingly, the second best place to be, not the worst. Why? Because at least with an obnoxiously aggressive boss, people know what you really think. They know where they stand. The feedback, however harshly delivered, is at least real information they can act on. This, she notes, is the unfortunate reason that some jerks seem to succeed in the world. Their teams, while miserable, at least get honest signals and can sometimes produce results. It is a low bar, but it is a real point. Brutal honesty eats dishonest flattery, even though it is far worse than caring honesty. The book uses Steve Jobs as a fascinating case study here, because Jobs was famous for telling people your work is shit. On its face, that sounds like pure obnoxious aggression, and sometimes it probably was. But Kim Scott digs deeper. She points out that with the people Jobs had strong relationships with, those harsh words landed differently, because the person knew, underneath it, that Jobs deeply respected them, and was only pushing so hard because he believed in their ability to do extraordinary work. The words were brutal, but the relationship carried the care. Now, Kim is very clear. She is not recommending you go around telling people their work is garbage. Her flip advice early on was simply, remember, you are not Steve Jobs. The point is that the line between obnoxious aggression and radical candor is not really about how blunt the words are. It is about whether genuine care is present and felt. Kim shares a painful personal example of her own slide into this quadrant. At Google, she once strongly criticized a proposal from Larry Page, one of the founders, in a company-wide email. She thought she was being bravely candid, speaking truth to power. But in reality, she had not taken the time to understand Larry's thinking, or to show that she cared. She just publicly attacked his idea. That was front-stabbing, plain obnoxious aggression dressed up as candor. And it taught her an important lesson about how easily we can fool ourselves into thinking we are being courageously honest when we are really just being a jerk. The key takeaway from this point is that honesty without care is not the goal, even though it is better than dishonesty. Challenging people is necessary, but if you strip out the care, you damage trust, you make people defensive, and you make criticism feel like a weapon rather than a gift. The aim is never to win, to dominate, or to vent. The aim is always to help. So when you challenge someone, the care has to be visible. People need to feel, in their bones, that you are criticizing the work because you believe in them, not because you want to tear them down. Point 4. Manipulative insincerity, the worst quadrant of all. The fourth key point covers the fourth and final quadrant, and it is the worst one of them all. Kim Scott calls it manipulative insincerity. This is what happens when you fail on both dimensions at once. You neither care personally, nor challenge directly. Manipulative insincerity is feedback, praise or criticism, that does not reflect what you actually think, and that is given to serve your own interests rather than to help the other person. It is flattery you do not mean. It is fake praise designed to be liked. It is saying nothing about a problem, not because you are too kind, but because you just do not care enough to bother, or because you think staying quiet gives you some political advantage. It is the passive-aggressive, two-faced, political behavior that poisons so many workplaces. The praise is phony, and the criticism, when it comes, often comes behind someone's back rather than to their face. What makes this quadrant so toxic is the motive behind it. In ruinous empathy, at least your heart is in the right place. You are being too nice, because you genuinely care about the person's feelings. In obnoxious aggression, at least your honesty is real. But in manipulative insincerity, neither the care nor the honesty is real. It is all about you, your image, your advancement, your desire to be liked, or your desire to avoid effort. As Kim Scott describes the inner monologue, he will be happy if I tell him I liked his presentation, and that will make my life easier than explaining why it actually sucked. In the long run, though, I really need to replace him. That is manipulative insincerity. It is pure self-interest masquerading as feedback. There's a powerful story in the book that illuminates the root of this behavior, and it involves Apple's legendary chief designer, Jony Ive. I've once pulled his punches when giving feedback to his team. He softened his criticism, was not fully clear about what was wrong. When Steve Jobs asked him why he had not been more direct, Ive replied, "Because I care about the team," and Jobs shot back with something devastating. He said, "No, Jony, you are just really vain. You just want people to like you." Recounting the story, Ive admitted, "I was terribly cross because I knew he was right." This is such a crucial insight. So often, what we tell ourselves is caring about people is actually vanity, our own desire to be liked. Caring personally means caring about the person. Worrying about whether they like you is about you. And that vanity is what pushes good people toward insincerity. Kim also points out a dangerous dynamic. When someone behaves with obnoxious aggression, gets called out for being a jerk, their natural next move is often to slide sideways into manipulative insincerity. They overcorrect. Stung by the accusation of being harsh, they become fake and political, instead of genuinely fixing the problem, which was a lack of care. So they go from bad to worse. The better move, when you realize you have been too aggressive, is not to become fake and nice, but to add the missing ingredient, care, and stay honest. The takeaway here is to watch your own motives like a hawk. When you are tempted to give empty praise or to stay silent about a problem, ask yourself honestly, am I doing this for them or for me? Am I trying to help this person, or am I just trying to be liked, to avoid discomfort, or to get ahead? Manipulative insincerity is a quadrant of people who have given up on both honesty and genuine care. And the cure is to reconnect with why you are really there. To help people do the best work of their lives, and to genuinely care about them while you do it. Point 5. Start by asking for criticism, not by giving it. The fifth key point is perhaps the most surprising and counterintuitive piece of practical advice in the whole book. If you want to build a culture of radical candor, where does it start? Most people assume it starts with you, the boss, bravely giving honest feedback to your team. But Kim Scott says no. It starts the other way around. It starts with you asking your team to criticize you. This feels backwards, but the logic is brilliant. Before you start dishing out candor, you need to earn the right to give it, and you need to prove that candor is safe. And the single most powerful way to do that is to go first by making yourself vulnerable. When you stand in front of your team and sincerely ask them to tell you what you are doing wrong, and then you respond well, several powerful things happen at once. Kim Scott lays out exactly why this matters so much. First, asking for criticism is the best possible way to demonstrate that you know you are not perfect and that you genuinely want to hear the truth. It shows humility. Second, you will learn an enormous amount, because almost nobody on earth observes you more closely than people who work directly for you. They see your blind spots clearly. Third, going through the experience of receiving criticism yourself, feeling that little sting and learning to handle it gracefully, gives you invaluable insight into how your own feedback lands for others. And fourth, It is one of the fastest ways to build trust. When people see that you can take it, they will believe you when you say you can give it with care. But here's the thing. Simply saying, "My door is always open," or "feel free to give me feedback" does not work. People are afraid to criticize the boss, and for good reason. It feels risky. So Kim Scott says you have to actively, even aggressively, solicit it. Ask a specific, pointed question that cannot be dodged with a polite "everything's fine." A great one she recommends is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? Then, and this is critical, you have to embrace the silence. Ask the question, and then count to 6 in your head, if you have to, resisting the powerful urge to let people off the hook. Let the awkward silence do its work, until someone finally offers something real. There is a wonderful illustration of this. One of the bankers who led Facebook's IPO told Kim about a time Sheryl Sandberg asked him for feedback after an investor meeting. "What could I have done better?" she asked. He could not think of anything. The presentation had been a home run. But Sheryl would not let him off the hook. "I know there was something I could have done better in there." He still drew a blank and started to get nervous. "You have a reputation for being great at giving feedback," she encouraged him. "I bet if you think about it, you can come up with something." Now he was sweating. But she just smiled expectantly and stayed silent. And finally, under the pressure of that patient silence, he thought of something real and said it. Her response? "Thank you. I will do better next time." She made it harder to stay silent than to be honest, and then she rewarded the honesty. And then comes the hardest part of all. How you react when you actually get the criticism. This moment makes or breaks everything. Kim Scott's rule is that when someone is brave enough to criticize you, you must reward the candor, not punish it. Do not get defensive. Do not argue. Do not critique their criticism or explain why they are wrong. Your only job in that moment is to listen with the genuine intent to understand, and then to find something in what they said that you can act on, and act on it visibly. Kim gives a charming personal example of rewarding candor in a visible way. Her co-founder Russ once told her she interrupted people constantly. It was true. She was an inveterate interrupter. But simply saying, "I know, I cannot help it," would have been a terrible way to reward his honesty. So instead, she pulled a fat blue rubber band out of her drawer, put it around her wrist, and asked Russ to snap it every time she interrupted him. She called it her Radical Candor. She wore it into her staff meetings and invited everyone to snap it, and even mentioned it at company all-hands meetings. The snapping genuinely helped her interrupt less, but more importantly, it sent an unmistakable signal to everyone. She had heard the criticism, she was acting on it, and she wanted more of it. If you can publicly make a change based on someone's feedback, you send an unmistakable signal to the whole team. It is safe to be honest here, and honesty gets rewarded. If instead you bristle or retaliate, even subtly, you have just taught everyone to keep their mouths shut forever. Kim illustrates this with the example of Larry Page and an engineer named Matt Cutts. She watched Larry actually encourage Matt to challenge him hard, grinning more widely the more passionately Matt argued against him. Larry never said, "Do not get emotional." He welcomed the challenge, which made it safe for everyone watching to challenge authority too. That is the culture you are trying to build. So the lesson is clear. Lead with humility. Before you ever ask your team to handle your honesty, prove you can handle theirs. Get before you give. It is the foundation everything else is built on. Point 6. Give praise and criticism the right way. The sixth key point gets down to the nuts and bolts of actually delivering guidance well, both praise and criticism, once you have laid that foundation of soliciting it first. Because even with the best intentions, the way you deliver feedback determines whether it helps or hurts. Let us start with praise, because most people are surprisingly bad at it. We think praise is the easy part, but vague praise is nearly useless and can even be counterproductive. Telling someone "great job" feels nice but teaches them nothing. They do not know what specifically they did well, so they cannot repeat it. Worse, lavish but empty praise can come across as insincere or even patronizing. Kim Scott learned this when she praised her own co-founder, Russ, in a way that fell completely flat. Good praise, like good criticism, has to be specific and sincere. It should explain exactly what was good and why it mattered, so the person understands the impact of their work and knows precisely what excellence looks like, so they can do it again. Praise done right is one of the most powerful tools a leader has, but only when it is genuine and detailed. Now for criticism, which is where the real anxiety lives. Kim Scott offers a whole set of practical principles for criticizing someone without crushing them. First and foremost, ground it in your relationship and make the care visible. The famous knife's edge that Steve Jobs talked about is the challenge of being completely clear that the work is not good enough, while simultaneously reassuring the person that you have total confidence in their abilities. You have to do both. Make it crystal clear that the problem is the work, not some unfixable flaw in who they are as a person. She offers a number of memorable, practical rules for this. Be humble. Frame it as your perception rather than absolute fact. Be helpful. Your goal is to help them fix it, not to prove you are smart. Offer the guidance immediately, in person, while it still matters, rather than saving it up for some formal review months later. And then a crucial pairing. Praise in public, but criticize in private. Praising someone publicly amplifies the good feeling and lets others learn from the example, while criticizing privately protects the person's dignity and keeps them from getting defensive. Another key rule: do not personalize. Never attack the person's character or make it about who they are. Focus entirely on the specific behavior or the specific work. There is a world of difference between this analysis had 3 errors in it, and you are careless. One is fixable feedback. The other is an identity-level insult. Kim also stresses something she learned from a painful and now famous personal experience. The single best example of radical candor in the whole book is the way her own boss at Google, Sheryl Sandberg, gave her feedback after a big presentation. Kim had just presented to Google's founders and the CEO, and it had gone well. Afterward, Sheryl took her for a walk and started with specific, sincere praise. She told Kim that her ability to be intellectually honest about both sides of an argument had earned her real credibility in the room, and she named 3-4 specific things Kim had said to prove she meant it. This was not empty flattery. Sheryl stopped, looked Kim in the eye, and made sure Kim registered that something she would feared was a weakness was actually a strength. But then Sheryl did not let the overall success stop her from delivering the hard part. She said, "You said, a lot. Were you aware of it?" Kim brushed it off, said yeah, she knew she did that, and waved her hand dismissively, clearly not taking it seriously. Sheryl offered to get her a speech coach, on Google's dime. Kim kept deflecting. And so Sheryl, watching the feedback fail to land, escalated her directness, exactly as radical candor requires when a gentle approach is not getting through. She said, "When you do that thing with your hand, I feel like you are ignoring what I am telling you. I am going to have to be really, really direct to get through to you. You are one of the smartest people I know, but saying so much makes you sound stupid. Now look closely at everything Sheryl did right, because it is a masterclass. She gave the feedback immediately, so it could actually help Kim's reputation before it suffered. She led with sincere, specific praise, but she did not sandwich the criticism between fake positives. The praise was genuine, and the criticism was clear. She started gentle and only got more direct when she saw it was not landing, gauging her guidance in real time. Crucially, she did not personalize it. She said Kim sounded stupid when she said not that she was stupid. The problem was a fixable behavior, not an unfixable flaw. As she offered concrete, tangible help, a specific speech coach. Kim says the result was that she did not walk away feeling like an idiot with defects. She felt like a valued team member her boss was willing to invest in. It still stung a little, candor usually does, but it worked. After just 3 sessions with the coach, the problem was dramatically better. That single conversation is the embodiment of caring personally and challenging directly at the same time. Here is the thing. You do not get to decide whether your feedback was radically candid. The person receiving it does. Candor is measured at the listener's ear, not the speaker's mouth, so you have to watch how it lands and adjust, just as Cheryl did when she saw Kim was not hearing her. If it did not land as caring, then it was not caring, no matter what you intended. One more vital principle that ties this all together. Offer more praise than criticism, but make sure both are sincere and specific. The goal is not some artificial ratio or the dreaded feedback sandwich where you bury criticism between 2 slices of fake praise. People see right through that. The goal is to build a relationship and a culture where honest guidance flows naturally and frequently in both directions, where it is just a normal, low-drama part of how you work together every day, rather than a terrifying event that only happens at annual review time. Point 7. Understand what motivates each person, rock stars and superstars. The 7th key point shifts from guidance to the second great responsibility of a boss. Building a cohesive team by understanding what truly motivates each individual person on it. And it contains one of the most useful reframes in the entire book, the distinction between rock stars and superstars. Kim Scott learned this lesson at Apple, and it corrected a serious mistake she would be making 4 years. Early in her career, especially at Google, she had focused almost all her attention and rewards on the people who were ambitious, hard-charging, and gunning for the next promotion. She assumed that is just how a great growth company should work. Everyone should want to climb, climb, climb. But then a leader at Apple opened her eyes. This leader pointed out that a healthy team needs both growth and stability. It needs people who push for change, yes, but it also needs people who provide a steady, reliable foundation. Nothing functions well if every single person is restlessly chasing the next title. So the leader described 2 types of excellent performers. The rock stars are the people who are absolutely world-class at what they do, who love their work, but who are on a more gradual growth trajectory. They are happy and stable where they are. They are called rock stars because they are like the rock of Gibraltar, the solid foundation you can build on. They do not want your job, they do not want to be the next CEO, and that is not a flaw, it is a gift. They bring deep expertise, consistency, and institutional memory. The superstars, on the other hand, are on a steep growth trajectory. They would go stir crazy doing the same job a year from now. They are restless, ambitious, and they are the engine of change and growth on the team. Both types are exceptional. Both are essential. And the magic insight is that you need a balance of both, and you have to manage them completely differently. This was a revelation for Kim, because she would been systematically undervaluing her rock stars, treating them almost like second-class citizens for not being ambitious enough, which made a lot of valuable people unhappy. The fix was to stop thinking in terms of potential, which is implicitly judgmental, who is a high potential person and who is not, and start thinking in terms of growth trajectory, which is a neutral question about what each person wants right now. Instead of asking, is this a high potential employee? You ask, what growth trajectory does this person want to be on at this moment in their life? And the word right now is essential, because Kim is emphatic that these are not permanent labels. People shift between steep and gradual growth trajectories throughout their lives, depending on what is happening. The book gives wonderful examples. 2 women on her team were aspiring Olympic athletes who poured their energy into sport while staying steady at work, and then 5 years later flicked entirely, rocketing up in their careers. Kim herself, when she was offered the chance to interview to be CEO of Twitter, a job she would have killed for a few years earlier, turned it down because she was pregnant with twins in a high-risk pregnancy, and her priorities had shifted to a more gradual trajectory at work. None of these shifts made anyone less valuable. A person might be a superstar one year and a rock star the next, then back again. Your job as a boss is to pay close enough attention to know where each person is right now, and to never slap a permanent label on anyone. There is also a critical clarification here. Wanting to be a manager is not the same as being on a steep growth trajectory. Plenty of brilliant people want to grow by deepening their expertise and increasing their impact, not by managing others. One of the great failures of traditional companies is that the only way to reward someone is to promote them into management, which can ruin a great engineer or a great salesperson by forcing them into a role they neither want nor are suited for. Growth and management should never be conflated. Kim drives home how badly things go when you put someone in the wrong type of role with a memorable story. The diamond cutters she would manage in Russia early in her career were master craftsmen, among the best in the world, true rock stars, who had absolutely no desire for her boss's job. Her boss, Maurice Tempelsman, on the other hand, told a story about his own younger, restless, ambitious self. While building his company, he once decided to try his hand at diamond cutting. One day, mid-cut, he got distracted by a phone call negotiating a big deal and accidentally ground $1 million diamond into worthless dust. The lesson is vivid. You do not want a restless, steep-growth superstar in a job that demands the steady patience of a rock star, and vice versa. Put a person in the wrong role for their current trajectory, and even a brilliant person will fail or be miserable. Kim adds one more guard against permanent labeling that applies to performance, not just ambition. It is tempting to brand people as high performers or low performers, but everyone has an off quarter now and then. Her colleague Jared Smith came up with a simple, humane fix. Instead of labeling people, rate the work, calling a given period an off quarter, a solid quarter, or an exceptional quarter. This keeps the focus on the work in a specific window of time, rather than stamping a permanent verdict on a human being who is always capable of changing. The takeaway from this point is found in its simplicity. Get to know each person on your team well enough to understand what they actually want from their work and their life. Value the steady rock stars as much as the ambitious superstars. And manage each person according to their real motivations rather than your assumptions about what they should want. Point 8. Have career conversations. Help people move toward their dreams. The 8th key point builds directly on the last one and gives you a concrete, powerful tool for actually understanding what motivates each person. It is a method developed by Kim's colleague Russ Laraway, and it is called the career conversation. The goal is nothing less than to understand each person's dreams and to help them take real steps toward those dreams. Here is the core idea. Your most important job in building a great long-term team is to genuinely understand what each person wants out of their career and their life, and then to actively help them get there, even if that eventually means helping them leave you. This sounds soft, but it is actually the foundation of deep loyalty and exceptional performance. People give their best work to a boss they truly believe is invested in their dreams. Russ Laraway designed a simple but profound framework. A series of 3 45-minute conversations that a manager has with each direct report, spread out over a few weeks. The first conversation is about the person's life story. You ask them to walk you through their life, from kindergarten to now, focusing on the major transitions and choices they made along the way, and why they made them. This sounds like a lot, but it is astonishingly revealing. The reason you pull motivations out of someone's actual life story, rather than just asking abstract questions, is that abstractions are so easily misunderstood. The book gives a striking example. Imagine an employee says, "Financial independence is really important to me." You might hear that and think, okay, she is materialistic, motivated by money. But then she tells you the story behind it. How at age 12, her mother had gone back to work, and the family missed her, and during a trip meant to reconnect. Her father, after a few drinks, pointed at a stripper and cruelly said she made more in a day than the employee's hard-working mother made in a year. The employee felt a burning anger on behalf of that woman, on behalf of her underpaid mother, on behalf of every woman. That is what she means by financial independence. It is not greed at all. It is about dignity and never being devalued. You would never learn that from an abstract question. The life story reveals the real human being and what truly drives them. And Kim notes that just this first conversation has more to build a real relationship and show you care than almost anything else you could do. The second conversation is about dreams. Notice the word dreams, not goals, or career aspirations or 5-year plans. Russ chose that word very deliberately because the usual corporate phrases tend to produce stiff, professional, fake answers, the kind of thing people think the boss wants to hear, carefully balanced to sound ambitious. The phrase career aspirations practically begs for a dishonest answer, a delicate dance between seeming ambitious enough. I want to be like you, but not too ambitious. But I do not want your job. It also focuses everything on promotions, which is a trap because people who want promotion never feel they are getting one fast enough, and people who do not want one feel lame for admitting it. Dreams, by contrast, invite something more honest and human. You ask the person what they want their life to look like at the very peak of their career, how they want it to feel. And you let them describe dreams that might have nothing to do with your company at all. In Russ's team, one person's dream was literally to run a spirulina farm someday. Another wanted to eventually become a kind of mini Jack Welch. Those are real dreams, and they would never have surfaced under a question about career aspirations at this company. The third conversation is about building a plan, connecting the dots between what the person is doing right now and the dreams they have described. Russ, being very analytical, would lay out each of the person's dreams, then ask what skills mattered most to achieve each one, and then ask where the person felt they currently stood on those skills. Together, you map out how their current role and future opportunities can help them build the skills that move them toward their dreams. This transforms the relationship. Suddenly, the boss is not just extracting work from an employee. The boss is a genuine partner in the person's life journey. Kim shares the example of Catherine, who actually started as the babysitter for Kim's twins, but really dreamed of working at Google. Rather than selfishly keeping a great babysitter, Kim helped Catherine get an interview at Google, and Catherine's career took off from there, later moving on to Facebook and then Twitter. Kim understood that her job was to help people pursue their dreams, not to trap them in a role that was convenient for her. The deep lesson of this point is that the best bosses are the ones who care about their people's dreams and actively help them get there. When you do this, you do not lose people, you earn a level of trust and commitment that money cannot buy. People will do the best work of their lives someone they believe is truly in their corner, helping them become who they want to become. And even when helping someone pursue their dream eventually means they outgrow your team, you will have built a lasting relationship and a reputation as the kind of leader people would run through walls for. Point 9. Get stuff done, together, the GSD wheel. The ninth key point address is the third great responsibility of a boss after guidance and team building: actually getting results. And here Kim Scott offers a practical process she calls the Get Stuff Done wheel, or the GSD wheel. The big idea is that as a boss, your job is not to personally get stuff done by issuing commands, but to create the conditions for your whole team to get stuff done together, achieving more collectively than any individual ever could alone. The biggest mistake driven leaders make, Kim says, is the impulse to dive straight into execution, to just decide and command, because they pride themselves on being get stuff done people. But skipping the groundwork leads to bad decisions and poor buy-in. The GSD wheel lays out the steps that need to come first, and it is a cycle, not a straight line. It goes: listen, clarify, debate, decide, persuade, execute, and learn, and then it repeats. It starts with listening. You have to listen to the ideas your team members have, and just as importantly, create a culture where they listen to each other. Kim describes two very different listening styles, and notably, she says you should use whichever one is authentic to you, rather than forcing yourself into someone else's mold. There is quiet listening, staying silent to create space for others to fill, which can be powerful but has a downside. When people cannot read you, they waste energy guessing what you think, and some may even invoke your name to push their own agendas. Tim Cook was a famous quiet listener. Because he spoke so rarely, people leaned in to hear him when he did. And there is loud listening, which was Steve Jobs' style, putting a provocative, strong opinion on the table, specifically to provoke a reaction and force people to challenge you back. Jobs would say, "Joni, here is a dopey idea," inviting his designer to push back. The key with loud listening is it only works if you have made it genuinely safe for people to fight back, otherwise you just steamroll everyone. There is a marvelous quote in the book that captures the danger of loud listening from Randy Nelson, the dean of Pixar University. He said of Steve Jobs, "He is a lion. If he roars at you, you would better roar back just as loudly, but only if you really are a lion, too. Otherwise, he will eat you for lunch." In other words, a loud listening boss surrounded by people too timid to roar back is a disaster, because nobody tells them when they are wrong. Kim, who is a loud listener herself, offers a useful technique for doing it well, borrowed from Stanford's Paul Sappho. Strong opinions, weakly held. You state your view clearly and forcefully to spark a real reaction, that then you go out of your way to invite people to tear it apart. Kim says she will state a position strongly and then immediately add, "Please poke holes in this idea. I know it may be terrible, so tell me all the reasons we should not do it." She once even put EUR RALWS I wise Earl I T I wise Earl I earring trophy on an employee's desk after her position proved correct and Kim's wrong. The whole point is that whichever style fits you, the goal is the same: to get to the best answer together, giving the quiet people a voice without letting the loudest people dominate. Next comes clarify. New ideas are fragile. They often come out half-formed, and if you throw them into a brutal debate too early, they get crushed before anyone understands their potential. So part of your job is to help people sharpen and clarify their ideas in a safe space first. Kim points to Susan Wojcicki, who later became CEO of YouTube, creating a special pre-meeting at Google, where new ideas could be developed and strengthened before facing the harsh main debate, because the main forum had become the place where new ideas went to die. Then comes debate. Once an idea is clear, you have to test it rigorously through real, robust debate. Kim uses the image of a rock tumbler. Ideas need friction to be polished into something valuable. Too many bosses think their job is to turn the rock tumbler off, to avoid the discomfort of conflict by just making a quick decision. But she insists the opposite is true. Your job is to turn the rock tumbler on, to push people to argue and pressure test ideas. Debate takes time and emotional energy, yes, but skipping it costs far more time and energy down the road when bad decisions unravel. She even recommends setting up a regular big debate meeting to make productive conflict a normal habit. The payoff of real debate is captured in a story Kim tells about a leader named Mark, who laid out an inspiring, ambitious vision for his team. Everyone nodded along, but one young woman had clutched her head in distress at lunch. In a culture without genuine debate, she would have stayed silent and the team would have marched off a cliff. But, because debate was safe, she finally spoke up and pointed out that Mark's vision, however inspiring, simply was not realistic. She would calculated that executing it would require everyone to work 85-hour weeks. Others chimed in with the real, intractable problems in the system. That candid debate saved the team from committing to something impossible. That is what debate is for. Not conflict for its own sake, but surfacing the truth before you commit to a course of action. After debate comes decide. Decisions should be made quickly, but not too quickly, and importantly, they should often be pushed down to the people closest to the facts, rather than always made by the highest paid person in the room. Then comes persuade, a step driven leaders love to skip. Once a decision is made, the people who were not part of making it still need to be brought along and genuinely convinced, so that they can execute with conviction rather than reluctance. Then, finally, execute. And Kim notes a crucial point about the boss's role here. Part of your job is to minimize the collaboration tax, all the meetings and management overhead, so that you and your team have maximum time for actual execution. And then the final step, learn. After you have executed, you examine the results honestly, learn whether you got it right, and then the whole wheel starts turning again with the next idea. The big takeaway from the GSD wheel is that great results come from a great collaborative process, not from a heroic boss barking orders. When you patiently listen, clarify, debate, decide, persuade, execute, and learn, together, you build both better decisions and a more committed team. You burst the bounds of any single brain. Rushing to results by skipping the human steps feels faster, but it is slower in the end, and it slowly destroys the trust and engagement that make a team great. Point 10. Stay centered. You cannot give what you do not have. The 10th and final key point is one that is easy to overlook, but absolutely essential, and it is a bit of a surprise in a management book. Before you can be a great boss to anyone else, you have to take care of yourself. You have to stay centered. Because, quite simply, you cannot give to others what you do not have yourself. Kim Scott is refreshingly honest about this. All of the radical candor we have discussed, all the caring personally and challenging directly, all the difficult conversations and emotional labor of leading people requires a tremendous amount of inner resources. It takes patience, empathy, courage, and emotional steadiness. And if you are running on empty, exhausted, frazzled, and depleted, you simply will not have the capacity to do any of it well. When you are stressed and burned out, you are far more likely to slide into the bad quadrants, snapping at people in obnoxious aggression, or being too tired to care and manipulated in sincerity, or avoiding hard conversations in ruinous empathy. Your ability to care about others is directly tied to how well you are caring for yourself. So Kim argues that staying centered is not a selfish indulgence. It is a core part of doing your job well. She rejects the usual framing of work-life balance, which treats work and life as a zero-sum game where every hour you give to one is stolen from the other. Instead, she prefers work-life integration, the idea that taking care of yourself and bringing your fullest, best self to work actually enriches both your work and your life, giving each a double bounce. The sleep you get, the exercise you take, the time with your family, these are not things you do at the expense of your team. They are precisely what make you capable of showing up for your team. She gets very practical about this, sharing her own personal recipe for staying centered. For her, it means sleeping 8 hours, exercising for 45 minutes, and having both breakfast and dinner with her family. Beyond the daily basics, she needs to read a novel regularly, take a romantic weekend away with her husband a few times a year, and take an annual vacation with her extended family. When she does these things, she can stay centered and grounded, no matter what chaos is raging around her at work. When she does not, she goes a little crazy even when everything at work is calm. The specifics will be different for everyone, but the principle is universal. Figure out what you personally need to stay grounded and resilient, and then protect those things fiercely, treating them as non-negotiable rather than as luxuries to be sacrificed the moment things get busy. Kim points to leaders like Dick Costolo, the CEO who took Twitter public during an incredibly stressful period, who maintained his composure and mental toughness in large part through deliberate habits like blocking 2 hours of uninterrupted think time on his calendar every single day. The leaders who can stay steady, confident, and caring in the middle of storm are usually the ones who have built strong routines to keep themselves centered. Their calm is not an accident. It is cultivated. The takeaway, and a fitting one to end on, is that being a great boss starts with being whole yourself. You are the instrument through which all of this leadership flows. If the instrument is neglected and out of tune, nothing else works. So take care of yourself, not instead of taking care of your team, but as the very foundation of being able to take care of them. Bring your whole self to work, and then take that whole self back home again, and protect it. Because the people who depend on you need you at your best, and you can only be at your best when you have made the care of your own mind and body a genuine priority. So that is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. If you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be the simple, powerful framework at its heart. Great relationships and great leadership require you to do two things at the same time. Care personally and challenge directly. Care without challenge is ruinous empathy. The false kindness that lets people fail. The mistake Kim made with Bob. Challenge without care is obnoxious aggression, honesty that wounds. And the absence of both is manipulative insincerity. The toxic, self-serving silence and flattery that poisons everything. Only when you bring genuine care and honest challenge together do you reach radical candor. The place where you can tell people the truth in a way that helps them grow. Because they know, beyond a doubt, that you are on their side. And remember where it all begins. Not with you bravely criticizing others, but with the humility to ask others to criticize you first, and to reward them when they do. Remember that the kindest thing is usually the clear thing. It is not mean, it is clear. Get to know the human beings you work with, their life stories and their dreams, and help them move toward those dreams. Build results through collaboration, not command. And take care of yourself so you have something left to give. Radical candor is not a technique for being a tougher boss. It is really a guide for caring about people enough to be honest with them. And that is a way of being that will serve you not just at work, but in every relationship in your life. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If this summary gave you something valuable, you know what to do to support the channel. And until next time, care personally, challenge directly, and have the courage to say what you really think.